Montesquieu's book is a consideration of causes, and a consideration of causes is a real philosophic activity. For Aristotle, there were four causes, and he treats them comprehensively. For David Hume, the problem of cause revealed the insufficiency of modern science as an explanation of things. For Montesquieu, this investigation of causes starts with the birth of Rome and goes through its adolescence, its growth, decline, and death. There is a deep understanding of what cause is in the book. We see this right from the get-go. Montesquieu writes, quote, "Modern history furnishes us with an example of what happened at that time in Rome, and this is worth noting. For the occasion that produces great changes are different. But since men have had the same passions at all time, the causes are always the same." End quote. The causes of political change will happen again and again, and the rise and fall of the greatness and decadence of a particular political community always reflect one another. Political science concerns itself with a discovery of these patterns in political communities, and it traces those patterns to the passions that animate human beings in political life. What made Rome great in the beginning? Let us take stock of Montesquieu's answers. In chapter 1, Montesquieu says that triumphs were the main cause of the greatness that this city attained, end quote. These parades fired the ambition to serve the public and aggrandize the city. Perhaps as a result of this, the Romans studied the military art and connected the military art to their understanding of virtue. Montesquieu discusses this in chapter 2, where he says that the Romans put their whole spirit and all their thought into perfecting war. They also had a healthy respect for innovation. He calls this respect for innovation the main reason for the Romans becoming the masters of the world. They happily integrated practices from foreign countries into their own, if those practices proved superior. Montesquieu also concludes that Rome had kings who were great men, and it is reasonable to think that their greatness contributed to the city's greatness, though it did not immediately promote the city's growth. When Montesquieu discusses the city's republic, he praises its competitive institutions, and especially the institution of the Senate, much more than any individual person. He mentions almost no individuals from Rome's Republican era in this book, and none of the great stories of public spiritedness like Cincinnatus or Horatio appear in the book. Period. In chapter 3, Montesquieu traces the success of Rome's armies to an equal distribution of wealth at home or an equal partition of lands. He says this alone produced a powerful people, that is, a well-regulated society. It also produced a good army, everyone having an equal and very great interest in defending his country. In chapter 4, Montesquieu claims that Rome was great because it was an agrarian community and hostile to commerce, a hostility that kept complacency, luxury, and laziness at bay. I have tried to show in previous videos that there is great ambiguity in whether or not these causes of greatness are actually great. There is a dark side to all of them. There are flip sides of great vices. They extinguish themselves. And however that may be, we are at the point in the story that Montesquieu is telling where these causes of greatness are turning against themselves. The Romans have been successful in war. They are gaining an empire. And these things are changing its people and its institutions. They do not necessarily change its policies, though, and this might be the cause for Rome's continuing greatness. Montesquieu has been anticipating this throughout. Consider the following from chapter 5. The main weakness of the kingdom of Syria came from that of the court, where the successors of Darius and not of Alexander reigned. The luxury, vanity, and indolence which, in all ages, have never left the courts of Asia, reigned especially in this one. The evil passed to the people and to the soldiers, and became contagious even for the Romans. End quote. The Romans were not just lovers of honor. Right from the beginning, it was a gang of robbers interested in pillaging, and hence interested in things and wealth, even if secretly. And this is a very human temptation, it seems. Success in war distracts with the fruits of war. Conquest brings power, but that is a mixed blessing. It also brings foreign practices and the anti-martial temptations of wealth and luxury. The Roman embrace of innovation and the traditions of other people could threaten the very integrity of Rome. And if you think that this is nothing, think about a modern cosmopolitan city today and ask whether the citizens of it, if they can be so called, are tough enough to wage war in the desert, or if they identify primarily with their own country. Ethnic restaurants? Are they a sign of greatness or decadence? At the end of chapter 7, we have an amazing statement about the conquests of Pompey the Great, who added the wealth of the East to Rome in the 60s and 70s BC. Montesquieu writes, Pompey completed the splendid work of Rome's grandeur. He joined an infinite number of countries to the body of its empire, which served to show Roman magnificence more than its true power. And although it seemed from placards carried in his triumph that he had increased the public revenues by more than a third, power was not increased, and public liberty was only more endangered. Now, using territorial gain and wealth acquisition as the standards, Pompey did augment Rome's greatness. But Montesquieu says at the same time that Rome's power was not increased, nor was public liberty more secure. What does this mean? First, consider power. How could the addition of so much territory and wealth not augment Rome's power? What it did is undercut Rome's ability to act as one, which was the basis of its power. Montesquieu explains this in chapter 9, entitled Two Causes of Rome's Ruin. Now we are back to the language of causes. Notice one interesting thing here, though. Unlike most of the work, here Montesquieu identifies Rome with the Roman Republic. The causes of Rome's ruin are the causes of the ruin of the Roman Republic. Now, the two causes that Montesquieu identifies in this chapter are the expansion of Rome beyond Italy and the granting of citizenship to foreigners. And depending on how you judge the granting of citizenship to foreigners, these things happen at roughly the same time. Rome grants citizenship to the cities around Rome after the social war of the late 80s and early 90s BC. Rome's conquests had spread beyond Italy after the Punic War and the Macedonian Wars of 150, as we have seen. But Pompey's great spreading of Roman power happened immediately in the aftermath of that social war. We have the following dynamic to consider. Rome's far-flung conquests increased its powers and exposed the Romans to foreign practices hostile to liberty and to martial virtue. These conquests elevated Roman generals, who, because they had to wage war so far from home, acted with longer terms and became powers unto themselves. Soldiers began to consider themselves to be in the service of particular generals, instead of in the service of Rome. Generals gave booty to their troops to cement their loyalty. Troops spent their booty on foreign luxuries that corrupted Rome's simplicity. From that point on, the people gave their favorites formidable authority abroad, and all the wisdom of the Senate became useless, and the Republic was lost, as we have seen. The great empire ruined the Republic, and the great city ruined the Republic as well. While Rome sent armies abroad to conquer, the foreign cities under the Roman thumb wanted a part of the action. Those cities close to Rome served its armies and shared its burdens. Should it not also share in political decision? It became necessary to grant those close allies a part of the Roman constitution. This upset public harmony and Roman unity even more. Listen to Montesquieu. After this, Rome was no longer a city whose people had but a single spirit, a single love of liberty, a single hatred of tyranny. A city where the jealousy of the Senate's power and the prerogatives of the great, always mixed with respect, was only a love of equality. Once the peoples of Italy became its citizens, each city brought to Rome its genius, its particular interests, and its dependence on some great protector. The distracted city no longer formed a complete whole. And since citizens were only such by a kind of fiction, since they no longer had the same magistrates, the same walls, the same gods, the same temples, and the same graves, they no longer saw Rome with the same eyes, no longer had the same love of country, and Roman sentiments were no more. Now we can say this about the Romans. They were corrupted less than most. They maintained their love of military matters, gladiators and such, despite their corruption, as Montesquieu suggests in chapter 10. They were not as corrupt and useless as the Greeks and the Romans, for instance. The martial virtues remained when all the others were lost. That's how Montesquieu ends that chapter 10. After chapter 10, we get the central chapters of the book on the great men who put an end to the Republic: Sulla, Pompey, and ultimately Caesar. We will concern ourselves with these men and these political actions in our next video.